Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're going to be looking at Queen's Code,
Okay.
Chapter 4 specifically. And this chapter is pretty fascinating. It's all about what happens when women stop emasculating men in their lives. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. The book dives right into the impact of this whole experiment.
Right.
And we're introduced to three women, Claudia, Karen, and Kimberly.
Okay.
They all decide to make this vow to change how they interact with men.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that the reactions they get from the men around them are almost immediate.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? Like, what is going on here? What do you think is causing these shifts in the men's behavior?
Well, the book suggests that there's this deep-seated desire in men to provide.
Provide.
Yeah, and it's not just about like practical things, like chores or whatever. It's more about contributing, making a difference, and then feeling valued for that.
Yeah.
And then the book gets even deeper and starts talking about potential neurological differences between men and women.
Okay, so let's get into that, this feminine brain versus masculine brain idea.
Right.
They use terms like diffuse awareness and single focus
Exactly.
to describe these differences.
Yeah, so the book suggests that women might have a broader awareness.
Okay.
They're taking in everything at once, like diffuse awareness,
Mm-hmm.
processing everything, the overflowing trash can, how everyone's feeling in the room, everything.
Okay.
But the masculine brain, it's more single focus, zeroing in on specific tasks or goals.
So wait, are we saying that men literally can't see the overflowing trash can? Like their brains are just filtering it out?
I know, it sounds a bit oversimplified.
Yeah.
But the book uses this contrast to kind of illustrate
Right.
how men and women might be perceiving information differently and prioritizing it differently, which obviously, can cause misunderstandings.
Yeah, because, I mean, if men are wired to focus on this providing,
Yeah,
but then their partners are constantly pointing out what they aren't doing,
right?
seems like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And that's where the book brings in this concept of the language of heroes.
Language of heroes.
Yeah, it suggests that men actually respond really well to language that acknowledges their desire to provide and be a hero.
Okay, so how does this language of heroes work in practice?
So instead of just like stating a need or making a demand,
Yeah.
women can try framing things in terms of what the man will provide by fulfilling them.
Give an example.
Okay, so instead of saying, take out the trash,
Yeah.
you could say, honey, taking out the trash would really help me feel more relaxed.
So it's like you're highlighting how his action is going to have this positive impact on you and, by extension, the relationship.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's this great example in the book with Karen and her husband, Mike.
Right. They were the ones having the issues with the
Trash can.
right, the trash.
Yeah, so Karen's always getting frustrated about it. But then she explains to Mike how him taking it out actually makes her feel,
Okay.
how it contributes to her sense of peace and order.
Huh. So she's giving him the why behind the request.
Yeah. It's like she's giving him the missing piece of the puzzle.
I see. So maybe men are motivated by meeting their partner's needs, but they need to actually understand what those needs are.
Right, and how their actions play a role in meeting them.
Okay, but this men as providers idea, doesn't it feel a little outdated?
I know, it definitely can feel that way.
Like it reinforces traditional gender roles and all that.
Right. And the book actually acknowledges this tension.
Right.
It brings up the feminist implications through Kimberly, who really pushes back against this idea at first.
Okay.
But the book argues that true equality doesn't necessarily mean erasing all the differences between men and women.
So are we talking about recognizing those differences and using them to improve communication and understanding?
That's one way to look at it. The
Okay.
book is suggesting that by understanding how men might be wired to provide,
Okay.
we can figure out how to communicate with them in a way that lets them be their best selves.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
So instead of providing being this purely masculine trait,
Right.
it's more about recognizing that everyone wants to contribute, to make a difference.
Exactly.
And it's about tapping into that desire in a way that works for men.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious to see how this language of heroes thing plays out. Does it work for single women, like Kimberly, as well as women in long-term relationships?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into next.
Sounds good. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. So we left off with Karen and Kimberly kind of starting to explore this whole language of heroes thing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see, like with Karen especially, right? She had that moment with the overflowing trash,
Yeah.
and it seems like she finally understood like where Mike was coming from. But can she actually change how she's communicating?
Well, that's what's so cool. She takes that new understanding and she actually puts it into action.
Really?
Yeah. She starts by just like noticing all the things that Mike already does provide.
Right.
You know, like financial security, a beautiful home, emotional support, even little things like feeding the cats.
Right.
So she's shifting her focus from what he isn't doing to what he is doing.
Okay, so is that actually changing anything? Like, are they interacting differently?
It totally is. When she brings up the trash thing again, it's not with that same frustration.
Okay.
You know, she's not nagging. She explains how him taking out the trash makes her feel
Gotcha.
like it contributes to her sense of peace.
Interesting. So it's not just a chore anymore.
Right. It's like a way for him to, well, the book actually says he compares it to scoring points.
Scoring points.
Yeah, like on a scoreboard or something.
Wow, so like now he has a clear objective.
Exactly. And remember, the book's saying men have this need to provide.
Right.
So she's basically giving him a way to fulfill that need.
Okay, so it's win-win, right?
It really seems like it. I mean, he even asks her what he needs in return.
Really?
Yeah, which shows that he's like actually willing to work together.
Wow, that's a big change from before.
Totally.
So let's talk about Kimberly for a second.
Okay.
She's got a whole different set of relationships, right?
Right.
Demanding job, her family situation, and she's single.
Yeah.
So how is she applying this to her life?
Well, at work, she starts focusing on recognizing her team's contributions.
Okay.
And she tries to frame tasks in terms of what they'll provide for the company.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like she's speaking their language.
Right. Like maybe it's easier to use the language of heroes at work because it's already all about providing and achieving goals.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
But then in her personal life, things get a little trickier.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's got her friend Melissa,
Right.
who's going through a tough time with her marriage.
Yeah.
So does Kimberly like try to give her advice based on all this?
She's very subtle about it. She knows Melissa probably doesn't want to hear advice about her marriage right now.
Right.
So she just kind of encourages her to think about what her husband is providing.
So it's like she's just planting a seed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then there's the whole thing with Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like there's definitely something going on there.
It's funny, she didn't really use the language of heroes with him intentionally.
Right.
But then she realizes he actually has provided something for her.
Like what?
Well, his concern and attention gave her a sense of safety, and that allowed her to be more open to change.
So it wasn't about some big gesture.
Right.
It was just about him being there for her.
Exactly.
Okay. So I guess providing isn't always about like grand gestures or material
I
things.
think sometimes it's the little things.
And then, of course, there's Kimberly's mom.
Oh, yeah, she's a big feminist.
Right.
So Kimberly is struggling with this whole thing.
Well, yeah. Doesn't this go against everything her mom has taught her?
That's exactly what she's wrestling with.
Like, does this make her a bad feminist or something?
Well, the book says true equality isn't about erasing all the differences between men and women.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those differences and appreciating them.
So it's not like we're going back to the old days where men are the only ones who provide?
No, not at all.
Okay, so what's the practical advice here? Like, how do we actually use this language of heroes stuff?
The book says to focus on the benefits of a request
Okay.
instead of just like stating the task.
Give me an example.
Sure. So instead of, please mow the lawn, you could say, honey, mowing the lawn would make our yard look so beautiful and I would be so proud of our home.
So you're painting a picture of the positive outcome.
Exactly.
And then the book also talks about appreciating the effort that men are already putting in.
Yes. That's so important because men are more likely to keep providing if they feel appreciated.
So it's a two-way street.
Ex-
Okay, but is this actually sustainable? Like, do Karen and Kimberly really see lasting changes because of all this?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we'll be unpacking in part 3.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we spent the last 2 parts really digging into Queen's Code and this whole language of heroes concept.
Yeah, it's been pretty fascinating.
Right. So now, like the big question,
Yeah.
does it actually work long term?
Right.
Do these changes actually last?
That's what we all want to know, right?
Yeah.
Well, the book definitely suggests it can,
Okay.
but, like any communication strategy, it takes effort.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to, adjust things as you go.
Okay, so let's go back to Karen and Mike for a minute.
Okay.
They had that breakthrough with the trash.
Right.
Can Karen actually keep this up? Like, can she really change how she talks to Mike all the time?
Well, the book talks about how she really makes a conscious effort. Like, she starts noticing and appreciating everything Mike's doing. And she's practicing, like, framing her requests in a way that emphasizes the positive impact.
Right, so instead of just saying, pick up your clothes,
Exactly.
she's saying something like, honey, having your clothes put away would make our bedroom feel so peaceful.
Yeah, like, it would make me so happy.
So she's really connecting it back to her own well-being.
Right. And the book is saying that men really respond to this. Like, it speaks to their desire to be the hero.
Okay, so how's Mike handling all of this?
Well, he's actually becoming more receptive to her requests.
Really?
Yeah. And he even starts anticipating her needs, like, before she even asks.
Wow, so he's getting on board with this whole thing.
It seems like it. I mean, he likes feeling appreciated.
Of course.
And he understands now how his actions are directly impacting Karen's happiness.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So things are looking up for Karen and Mike.
It looks that way.
But what about Kimberly?
Right. She's got a lot going on.
Her situation's a lot more complicated, right?
Definitely.
So she's doing well at work.
Yeah, the language of heroes seems to be working there.
Okay, but her personal life.
A bit more challenging.
Right, like with her friend Melissa,
Yeah.
she was kind of just planting a seed.
Right, encouraging her to see things differently.
But does Kimberly figure out how to use this stuff in her own romantic life? Like with Jack?
Well, she doesn't really use the specific language with him,
Okay.
but she does start to see him differently.
Yeah.
She realizes that his attention and concern have actually provided something valuable for her,
Like what?
a sense of security, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and validation,
Yeah.
which actually helped her be more open to change.
So again, it's not about these huge gestures.
Right.
It's the little things that matter.
Yeah, sometimes those are the most important.
So I guess the big takeaway here
Yeah.
is that Queen's Code isn't saying this language of heroes is like a magic solution,
No, definitely not a magic bullet.
but it is saying that understanding how men are wired can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think the key is to use this knowledge with good intentions, right?
Of course, not to manipulate anyone,
Exactly.
but to create better relationships
More fulfilling relationships.
and to make sure everyone feels appreciated.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about,
Me too.
and hopefully our listeners too.
Yeah, I hope so.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to take a look at your own relationships.
Yeah.
Think about what the men in your lives provide
Right.
and how you can show them that you appreciate it.
Those are really important questions.
They are, and until next time on The Deep Dive, keep exploring.